All right, how'd it go? So,
So I haven't had time to work on anything substantial since last time. I've gone through a bit more of the grammar material, but nothing really to report there. Um, yeah, unfortunately, just some stuff came up. Um, but I think last time the other plan was to um, do some more text analysis on uh, possible
yeah,
minds.
yeah, we can try that.
With the grammar stuff, I do feel like I'm a little bit uh, directionless with the material. I'm just sort of like watching stuff, but I'm not sure what the best thing to focus on is, or like whether I should start the peak off stuff, for example, as
Well,
opposed.
that's a choice really. If you want to focus more on grammar, or try moving on to the text analysis stuff.
Um, I guess the question is whether uh, the grammar stuff is going to hold me back on any of the text analysis um, as it stands. So I feel like I've
I
got
don't.
a fairly good intuitive grasp, but yeah.
Yeah, I don't think it would be a big problem.
If it is, it should be reasonably obvious, I imagine.
Yeah, if stuff starts coming up, you can go back to it.
Yep.
Yeah, so the book reading, I think you probably have enough grammar for these things to work fine. And then the analyzing lies stuff should definitely be fine because it's not about detailed grammar analysis.
Yep.
Okay, so let's try taking a look at this one, chapter 25 by Wolfram.
Cool.
You've got the book, right?
Yep. I've got the EPUB up, but the app that I'm using is not amazing. But I've got the RTF around somewhere as well.
Yeah. Okay. What I wanted to try first is, without reading it, look at only the topic sentences of every paragraph and see what you can understand about the article. I think it's informative to try looking at things that way, and some things make sense that way and some do not.
Yep. Um, okay, I'm just opening up the uh,
I'll start throwing them in MindNote, I guess.
okay, so there's a yep. All right. Well, in terms of topic sentences, I feel like it's uh not off to an amazing start. Um, as in the first sentence being, I see technology as taking human goals. I guess it can be. Like it might be okay. The I
Yeah,
see
that's
part.
just a really generic beginning. We'll see where he goes with it. You'll need to. There's probably like a lot of paragraphs, but okay, there's a break. So we'll go up to the break to start with. Okay, so Wolfram topic sentences. Yeah, Stephen Wolfram. Okay. So, yeah, take a look and see if you understand anything or how it looks like to you as an outline.
Yep. Okay.
And especially you
So,
can try to look at whether they fit together or they seem like disconnected or jumpy.
yep. So, yeah, I see technology is taking human goals and
I
making them.
can I can send you a copy paste of these.
I'm not sure how
If that
much quicker it'll
helps.
be. Um, we can try.
Well, it's in tutoring now.
Cool. This should actually, I think. Oh, it sort of works. Yep. So we've got technology is about automation. So people talk about the future of intelligent machines and whether they'll take over and decide what to do for themselves. Okay, so that's both talking about the future of intelligent machines. Well, in fact, it's intelligent machines is the is what the second two clauses are. Not even sure, they're not full clauses even. Whether they'll take over. I'm not sure if
Yeah,
that's right.
the main words here are
Um,
people talk. About is then a prepositional phrase. And then we have the future. And then we have intelligent machines in a nested prepositional phrase. So we have a modifier in the verb and then a submodifier for that, and we get to intelligent machines. So they're grammatically they're not very central, but they appear to be central for the actual intended meaning.
mm.
So it's questionable writing to put keywords like intelligent machines would hopefully be the subject or the object.
Yeah. Um, I'm just wondering how you'd or I guess it's not that important, but it's like intelligent machines and whether they'll take over and decide what to do for themselves is sort of like one unit that's not a grammatical unit there, but yeah. And then what kind of things have intelligence or goals or purpose? So that reasonable or seems to reasonably link back. Um,
Yeah, backing up slightly. So the first one is about technology, and he does mention machines, and then he's going to intelligent machines. So it's a small jump, but it's not that bad.
yeah.
But he did not actually mention intelligent machines here.
No, I mean he mentions
Well, he does
automation, but
indirectly because he says taking human goals and making them, letting machines do human goals. So that could be talking about intelligent machines, but it's also easy to think of it as something else like if my goal is to get up to a higher level in the building, then an escalator helps with that goal. But that's not, an escalator is not an intelligent machine.
no, yeah. Um, yeah, I mean there's a leap there about the limit of or what happens as we become better at making goals automatically executable. It's sort of an odd way to talk about it because usually people talk about automation as opposed to like you can't sort of phrase this the same way. So,
Okay, so what things are intelligent or have goals or have purpose?
so this seems reasonably well connected.
Yeah,
I mean, if we, given the intelligent machines thing, um, that's an important question. Um, this next part, people might say the weather has a mind of its own, is like, if not a non sequitur, is really, really close. Um,
yeah, I assume he's jumping into an example, and so it's
hmm,
relevant in that way. he's like, because he's talking about what things are intelligent, and then he's talking about something people use language that attributes intelligence to. So
Yep.
he's trying to discuss examples of candidate ideas, but he did it without saying, he doesn't say this is an example or what its purpose is in this sentence. Like he says that this is an instance of what people might say. So like this sentence is an example of something people might say, but that doesn't mean it's an example of something people say about intelligence. You know?
Yep.
It's just an example of something people say as written here.
Yep. And then we can argue that our brains are doing vastly more sophisticated computations than those in the atmosphere. Okay, so now this is an example of something, and we're like linking it back via atmosphere. So we're more complicated than that, which I guess mind is a link there, but it's definitely gone off the rails from what he was talking about before. Maybe he can bring
Yeah,
it back, but
he seems to be going into more detail on this weather thing, which seems like a sidetrack. Like it's an example of a misconception rather than talking about like good ideas.
mm,
And it's not even a misconception people really have, I don't think. I mean, maybe they used to when they first said it. But today, I don't think anyone really thinks the weather has a mind. That would be an
no,
unusual
no,
view.
it's no, it reminds me of the same sort of shortcut as like electrons want to be in low energy states. In that electrons don't want anything, but it's just easier to talk about.
Yeah, people don't mind speaking loosely, but they don't have all the misconceptions that their words have.
Mm, that's a good way to put it. And then what makes us okay? All right, so it's phrased. It starts out like a question, but it's not a question. Um,
Uh,
what makes
Hold
us
on
different from all those? Oh, yep.
on this previous one. So the grammar is we are the subject, and then we have can as the finite verb and argue as the non-finite verb. So this is like the main thing he's saying is we can argue, but it's not really what the sentence is about. He does we can argue, and then he has that, and then he has the real sentence, and you could literally just delete the beginning.
Well, it makes it a better linking between the topics if you do that.
Yes, because it's staying on the topic of atmosphere, computations, etc., as opposed to the topic of what people can argue about. He's hedging, like he doesn't want to make an assertion. He doesn't want to claim that our brains do vastly more sophisticated computations than those in the atmosphere. I assume because he's just scared to claim anything. Like,
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure why out of this. I mean, it also is uh, so it's sort of interesting in that it's like where he says like people might say, for instance, um, you could add the same sort of thing here. Like people might say that our brains are doing vastly more sophisticated computations, but it's used in a very different sense in that this one is introducing an example, and this one
yeah,
is really trying to make a point, but in an indirect manner.
yeah. For this one, when he says people might say because he wants to disown it, he's not saying that he says this. This is not his own
Mm.
personal opinion that the weather has a mind of his own. He does not want to take the blame for that misconception. He just wants to talk about other people's bad ideas. So that's reasonable. And then this one, he totally means himself. Like he would argue it. But he's just sort of saying, well, we only have arguments, not truth.
Yeah, which is, I mean, I guess part of there's like the semantic sort of point that the number of interactions happening in the atmosphere is far vaster than the number happening in any single person's head. And so if you
Yeah,
looked at those as computations, then, but that's sort of besides the point. They're not meaningful in the same way that thought computations are.
yeah, I thought of that too, but I doubt that it's what he intended. If you
No.
want to get into that, you have to actually talk about it. And
Well, the other, oh yeah,
yeah, it seems tangential. We can tell the
it's
difference
also,
between organized, purposeful computation and just the laws of physics can be interpreted as like sort of arbitrary computations all over the place.
sophisticated, I think is, like if you said meaningful, I think it'd be more on point, but sophisticated is, I guess, the way to that is indicating that.
Maybe. He might just
It's
mean that like our brains are like sophisticated thinkers and the atmosphere's not. The word doesn't necessarily mean much.
no, yeah. Um, it's another hedging word. Um,
Yeah, it's not. It doesn't have a clear meaning here. It could mean more than one thing.
okay.
All right. What makes
Um,
us different from all those other systems in the particulars of our history? What? Oh, is not in,
just,
which give us our notions of purpose and goals. Well, that's a strange claim. We only have
yeah.
purpose and goals because of the particulars of our history. Like, so if I had a different childhood, I wouldn't have purpose and goals. Or does he mean like the history of the species?
Um, it's odd in that this feels like a sentence that you'd want to hedge around a lot more rather than like the
Right.
previous one.
Yeah, this one he didn't hedge. He just asserted this thing is what makes us different.
Um, does that also mean that the particulars of the weather history are really important? Like if the weather was different a century ago, it might have purpose and goals now.
I assume he's saying
Um,
the history of humanity is different than the history of the weather. So it's like has evolution or something, whereas the weather history doesn't.
I mean, yeah, particulars can mean a lot of things.
Just a sec.
Um, yeah, so it's unclear whether he's talking about the like actually special, meaningful attributes that make us different from all of those other systems. I guess all of the like he says those other systems, and I think we've only talked about he's only actually mentioned one in the topic sentences, like the
Yeah,
weather. Um, presuming atmosphere is meaning the same sort of thing,
yeah,
even though weather is a much more complex system than just the atmosphere. Um, but yeah, so those other systems, maybe there's more than one, or maybe he's just talking about a generalization that he hasn't been explicit about yet, or at least not in the topic sentences.
yeah. Okay, so when we consider the future of AI, we need to think about the goals. Seems like a reasonable sentence,
Yep.
in general, although it doesn't follow up on this extended, detailed tangent.
We've got goals mentioned in the one before, and then right near the, well, the third paragraph, but that's it. Oh, sorry, and the first one. So goals is the main sort of like linking idea there.
Yeah, right. And then what
Um,
will people be doing in the future is not very specific, so we don't really know what's in that.
yeah.
Okay,
Um,
let's now that we have an overview, let's go back and look at the actual paragraphs quickly and see what we missed or like, what was like we expected it to be and what wasn't.
so we got human goals of the past, or automating human goals, and human goals of the past have entailed moving objects from here to there using a forklift rather than our hands. Um, all of them, or
Yeah, that's such
just
a strange comment. And why is that a past goal? We do forklifts in the present.
and presumably we'll be doing them in the future. Um,
Yeah, and then he says now, like there's a contrast. So in the past we were interested in forklifts, but now the work we can do automatically is mental rather than physical. Wait, what? We also do physical work automatically.
we've still, yeah. In fact, we keep doing more and more and more of that. So, like, yes, we've like in the, I guess, like give or take, past 200 years, it's become far more prominent for like mental automation rather than physical automation. Um, but yeah, I mean, even thousands of years ago, we used mechanical things to help us with mental stuff, though. Um,
Yeah, like the abacus.
yeah. Um, even just
You
like
do,
writing things down, like we like using tablets of clay and things that you could write into and then erase.
yeah,
Um, I think there was a South American culture that had some of those.
yeah.
Okay,
So
so it's not
this is odd, and it's obvious. It's not just a straight assertion, but like an extra strong assertion. So he's very variable on how much he wants to hedge. It seems like he doesn't have a good policy for it.
not just that, but then what he actually follows it up with, like we can automate many of the tasks we humans have long been proud of doing ourselves.
Right. That
Um,
sounds like it's obvious that we can automate poetry, for example, and
yeah, or
science.
art. Like, uh,
Yeah,
there's a lot of things that, and I mean, maybe some people were proud of lifting big weights that we could do automatically now, but it doesn't. Yeah. Um, why would we be proud of doing the boring stuff?
yeah. So this is both odd and seems kind of controversial, and it's not what we expected from reading the topic plan. Like we didn't know that was coming,
No. Um,
like at
and
all.
then he ends the paragraph almost with the same sort of question as the first sentence of the last paragraph. What's the
This,
future of the human condition in that situation?
this is
I
it's
mean,
really weird. Condition in that situation, like I don't even know what he's talking about. In what
which
situation?
in
Like I sort of think
the
he means
situ
what's the future of the human condition, meaning like the what is the general human situation and what's life like? In the context of we automate more and more mental stuff with machines. I assume he tries to mean that, but I don't think we automate more and more mental stuff with machines is very well referred to as in that situation.
no, I mean, I feel like we're doing a lot of filling in the gaps here,
Yeah,
which it's not even like necessary in terms of the number of words that he has here. The ideas are pretty straightforward. Um, okay, yeah, it's a weird paragraph.
all right, so what happens next? All right, people talk about intelligent machines, whether they'll take over. This is this actually this and is bad. It should be or. Like cuz they could take over or they could decide to what to do for themselves. It could be one or the other. It doesn't have to be both together.
I think it's like what we've got is it's a list of three things. Like people talk about the future of intelligent machines, whether they'll take over, and implied whether they'll decide what to do for themselves. So that seems to be like the most reasonable way to read that.
I think it's so people talk and then about and then we have an and joining two things. So they talk about thing 1 and oops, I went too far. So they talk about uh,
Yeah, thing one, and then
and then thing 2 I think is the entire rest of it.
yeah,
I think this is thing 2 as a group.
that's the only way to parse it, I think, because otherwise the it should have
Yeah,
been actually
because it
a
can't be
list.
people talk about decide what to do for themselves. It doesn't have the right words.
Yeah. Um,
Right. So this and should be an or because these two parts are actually separable.
yep. Um, Wolfram might have a uh predilection against using or because of the actually no, if you in terms of coding stuff, it's more like it's more suitable there. Um, because it like as in and or. Um, but yeah, okay.
All right, so where does he go with this? We're talking about
That
the
the
future of
invention
intelligent. Oh, wait, so another thought. He didn't really bridge the gap to intelligent machines very well once we read the extra sentences.
no.
He did talk about
With the
machines automating mental things, but that doesn't necessarily mean intelligent machines because like a calculator can automate mental math for you, and a like a word processor can automate memory for you in a way. So you
yep.
get like mental automation from non-intelligent machines. And then on the other hand, if you want mental automation via actually intelligent machines, it is unclear that that exists today, like period.
Yeah, it's sort of interesting. They talk about the future of intelligent machines as though there's a present. Like it sort of
Yeah.
implies,
And he does
as
say
opposed
now
to,
here. So this
um,
sentence is about the present.
yeah. And while it's like doing work automatically, like mental work automatically does not mean intelligent.
Yeah.
Um,
And this
as we covered.
rather
Yeah.
than just really should be in addition to.
Yeah.
I mean, it'd still be incorrect, but it'd make more sense. Okay, so It's not very good. It seems to be the main
It's
takeaway.
yeah. Um, so not just has he got this like this introduction of intelligent
Oh.
machines that's a bit awkward,
Well, here's
but
a
then the
very
next sentence.
strong claim that I also was not expecting.
So I hadn't even gotten past goals at that point. Like he brings out inventing goals, which is not something that is like even close to referenced before. But
It's
yeah.
implicitly referenced in the previous sentence. So, like, decide what to do for themselves means inventing their own goals.
Ah, yeah, yep, yep. That makes sense. Um, though, I mean, it feels pretty poor writing in the sense that well, it's just another gap, I guess, to fill in.
Yeah, so for a general audience, that's really bad. That's too hard to expect them to connect this to inventing their own goals. Like none of the words overlap, and he hasn't explained the concepts to us. So he's just sort of relying on you already understanding this enough to link those two things. But this is a popular book. It's supposed to be readable for people who don't already understand this. The point of the book is to learn something about it.
Maybe that's the reason that it's chapter 25 and not chapter 1.
No,
Um,
every chapter is by a different author, so
oh
I think
yeah,
they're just sort of
just
mixed around.
um, the not that I necessarily think this was the case, but the editor might have put this later on so that
Oh,
the reader ended up with more prior knowledge before getting to it.
oh yeah, that is possible. It's really hard and awkward for them if they invite like a famous guy to write something to then reject it, I think. But you can
Yeah.
put it in the end.
Um, yeah, so I mean, it's interesting that he makes such a strong claim here as well, um, in that he's not hedging this one at all. But I mean, as you know, we know from the yes/no sessions, there are ways to automate the creation of goals, um, or at least patterns that you can. And that would be a path to automation. We don't need to know everything for a path to exist.
Yeah, this is like saying there's no path means you could never accomplish it, is what it seems to
That
be.
it's impossible.
Which is
Um,
like it's an odd claim in a Possible Minds book, and for someone who understands that our brain is a computer, so it is
yeah.
like running computations automatically. Like, what's the difference?
Um, well, where was Oh no, it's much later on that he talks about our the particulars of our history. Um, but maybe he thinks that we don't automate the creation of goals either,
Someone
or
or
the
something has to define. But see, this isn't true at all because we're a biological machine, and we've
there's no.
formed purposes that were not put there by biological evolution. We have
Um,
some flexibility there.
moreover, it's like this is then directly contradictory to the idea of people talk about whether they'll decide what to do for themselves. Um, I mean, at least insofar as whatever someone tries to define like an AGI's purpose as, the AGI doesn't have to accept that.
Okay, so he's explaining the history thing now that he gets to later. So he just brings up this history thing mid-paragraph.
Yeah, okay. Um,
Goals are uniquely human. Huh.
I'm,
He doesn't think
I'm
humans
not.
are machines or something. I don't know.
Um, I mean, it's also unclear whether he says that whether he's meaning that goals are like cosmically uniquely human, or whether up to this point in history goals have been parochially uniquely human.
Yeah, given his claim that there's no path to automating inventing goals, it seems like he really means uniquely human.
This seems like he's arguing for an Alain Vital.
Yeah.
Um,
Do you know who this guy is though?
yeah, Wolfram. I mean, I'm obviously familiar with Wolfram Alpha, but I see him around occasionally. I think he
Yeah.
tried to do a big press thing recently because he thinks he's got a new fundamental theory of physics or something or other.
Oh, I wasn't familiar with that, but I know that he's literally done work related to universality of computation with the cellular automata stuff. Um, So therefore, he knows about computational universality, so he shouldn't think humans are special, right?
Yeah, that it's I mean, this feels to me that uh type of thing um where he's been incredibly lazy and just hasn't bothered to like really be rigorous here because, oh, the big points are later on or something like that. Um, so uh yeah, there we go. So this 3 months ago, Stephen Wolfram kicks off a ambitious new project to find the fundamental theory of physics. Find.
Oh, so he doesn't have one. He's just going to start finding it real quick.
Well, I'm sort of unclear in that or he thinks he's got a way to find it. So he thinks he's got like a meta theory of everything, maybe? I'm not really sure. I haven't listened to, I mean,
Yeah.
I saw some of these and I think I try, well, I'm not even
Well,
sure if I
his
tried to
article
listen
is
to it.
not persuading me to give his physics a chance.
No. Um,
Okay, so
okay.
what things have intelligence? We only know one great example. Our brains are human intelligence. So he says right
One
now
thing
we
that
only know one, but a moment ago he said like uniquely human. So I'm confused.
he also he also mentions that when where the machine is concerned, we can give it a goal when we build it, which is unclear whether that contradicts goals being uniquely human. Um, like once we give a machine a goal, is it now not uniquely human?
I don't
Maybe
know,
he
but
means like
what he says
the
next
invention
is
of
that
goals.
he once thought human intelligence had a big lead on everything else that existed in the natural world, but he's realized that's not the case.
Okay, so yep, so he points out evolution stands apart from the rest of existence. Um, that doesn't hold.
Yeah, so he says this is not the case. And that leads into the weather thing, which makes it sound like maybe the weather thing is his own idea. Yeah, look, the weather thing seems to have no place in modern scientific thinking, but so, huh, did
Okay,
not see that but coming. So when he said people might say, he meant himself.
or yeah,
It's not as silly as it sounds. The brain receives input, computes things, generates output, just like the weather. The weather computes things. All sorts of systems do computations, whether it's a brain or a cloud. So he's having trouble seeing the difference. Ah, so we can argue has a but. So he reversed both of these in the next sentence, and we didn't know it. They both got buts right after
which
them.
is that this like the broad equivalence between kinds of computation sounds like is about to lead into a theory of like brain in a jar, except it's brain in a cloud. And then this
Wait,
renders the question.
what? We're poignant because we're not as special as we thought. Non-specialness is poignant. Let's look up poignant, because
Isn't that like something worth referencing, worth
sadness or regret. Like, why would we
oh,
regret
okay.
that if we were less alone than we thought, in a way? I can see why someone would say that, but I don't agree.
But he's saying again, it seems we're not as special as we thought. So I almost feel like this is him dropping a like foreshadowing another but.
I think he's just hedging there.
Yeah. Um, but I mean, he might be hedging, but his point seems to be that like he's arguing that we're not as special as we thought.
Yes, we're not computationally special. We are universal classical computers. We're not the only ones. My iMac is one as well. But that's not what makes humans special. Like you were talking about goals earlier. We invent our own goals, so that's a different thing than universal computation.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure he's not arguing the weather has goals.
Okay, so what makes us different is a particular history, which gives us our goals. So yeah, he's sort of saying your goals are determined. He gave it up here. somewhere.
I
Right,
think it
your
was the
goals are
simulator.
determined by your personal history, cultural environment, and the history of your civilization. And this is where our goals come from. And the weather doesn't have that. That's
So he references all those systems of nature that are pretty much equivalent, is where all those systems come from, but he
yeah.
doesn't really.
He means equivalent in
Um,
terms of their computational capabilities. He should not have put this comma here.
yep. What does comma actually do anything? Like, no, it's
Confuses people.
it's. I mean, it might be where you'd pause. No, you wouldn't even pause there.
People don't know the rules for commas and they write long sentences and feel like they need a comma. So he's trying to break up different parts of the sentence. He's like, this is a section of the sentence. And this is a section of a sentence. He found a breakpoint that's like somewhat natural, like before the prepositional phrase. So if you don't know the rules for commas, that seems like a reasonable guess.
Yeah, if you wanted to break it up though, you could like put commas around pretty much, for example, um, turn into a parenthetical. Like that could at least break up the sentence a bit. But yeah, no, that comma is odd.
Yeah. So, oh, a general tip. If your sentence feels too long, so you feel like you need a comma, like there's too many different parts, but you're not supposed to have a comma, um, rewrite the sentence, make it shorter.
Yep.
Don't
Or two
throw in like a
sentences or
comma that shouldn't be there. Just find a way to reorganize things so you don't run
yep.
into that problem in the first place.
You could also I mean you could add the in terms of the computation capabilities like after the R. Um like if you really wanted to that R in terms of their computational capabilities pretty much equivalent. Like that reads a bit nicer at least. Well, it reads nicer
Yeah.
than the weird comma at least. Okay, so our history gives us notion of purpose and goals. It's a long way of saying that why that when the that's a long way of saying that when the
Yeah, I
box
was
on our
also
desk thinks
struggling to
as
read this
well
one.
as the human brain does, what it still won't have intrinsically are goals and purposes. Okay. Um, so what does he mean the previous sentence by that? Like,
Yeah, it seems like it means the previous sentence.
um, unless he's talking about like, uh, no, okay, no, it doesn't make sense to like to talk about the previous paragraph, like the idea of us being similar.
This is so
I
confusing.
could
He's
put
saying when it thinks as well as us, it won't have goals and purposes. But I feel like having goals and purposes is part of what it means to think as well as us. If it doesn't have those, it's not thinking as well as us.
it.
Does he mean
I'd
when it
argue it's not
computes
thinking.
as well as us?
I mean, it already computes tons of stuff better than we do.
Yeah, it depends what you mean. I believe if you just look at sort of raw computing power, our computers are still behind our brains. So
Oh yeah,
we
yeah.
might need another like Moore's law iteration. Maybe that's what he means.
Um, that said, I don't know how much research has really been done on like trying to find equivalence, uh, like measuring computation of a neural network is people have to come up with a like a way to translate that into numbers, and I
Yeah, yeah,
suspect that
yeah.
they'd be on the higher end to start with, and then we'd optimize. Um, so even that, like, I'm not sure about. I mean, the other thing is that once someone like actually writes an AGI, I mean, we'll actually have an idea of what hardware it takes to run it. Um, but I wouldn't be surprised if like the the brain is really, really inefficient in terms of its how it's got here and what it's doing.
Okay, so his main theme seems to be goals are parochial. Computers in general are not parochial, just humans are parochial. which I don't agree with at all. I think there's objectivity to goals, like the goal of not destroying the means of correcting your own errors is no parochial based on your particular biology or particular psychology, you know?
Yeah. Um, I think those, I'm not sure if those actually refers to the goals and purposes either. It's sort of quite close, but in terms of the subject of the previous sentence, although, because he's talking about a long way of saying. But yeah. Anyway, goals and purposes are defined by our particulars.
Well, so those
Um,
is a needs a plural referent, and this is right here on plural. I
mm,
think it's supposed to refer to it. I don't know what else it would be. And it if it does refer to it, it fits the stuff he was saying earlier. Like it seems like the same point he was
mm.
making. So I do think that's what he means.
Um, I think I mean, well, he doesn't draw the difference between personal biology, psychology, and cultural history, and like collective human biology. As in this
Yeah,
sentence would mean either.
right. He's drawing a distinction between personal psychology and like group and tradition psychology, but not between human biology in general and an individual person's genes. So yeah, there's an inconsistency, a lack of parallelism there. Okay, so for considering the future of AI, we need to think about goals. That's what humans contribute. Our civilization's contribution is goals, and it's only the
Not in coming up
execution
with a
of
way to do
goals
it.
that can be automated. I do not agree, but okay.
Um,
Oh, now he
yeah,
asked this question: what will the future of humans be in such a world? This seems like it should be its own paragraph.
where the world where the execution of goals is more automated, I
Yeah,
guess.
yeah.
Um, what will there be for them to do? Okay, so that's confusing different subjects. Um, I mean, he's talking about humans, and what humans do, but that sentence doesn't read very well. Okay, one of my
This
projects has been done. Yep.
this is an anachronism. He's he's trying to tell us about the difference between the modern perspective and the past perspective. So he says in the past, exercising on a treadmill would seem crazy. But while trying to compare the two perspectives, he forgot that our concept of crazy is a modern concept, not a universal thing shared by all past cultures. So there's an irony there about his attempt to enlighten us with another point of view, and while simultaneously actually failing to think about it himself.
Um, just skipping up again as well. He's got a non sequitur for one of my projects. Been understanding uh, evolution of human purposes. Okay, no, human purposes over time. I missed that. That makes more sense. Um, it's just confusing when he talks about like evolution of human, or you could just say humans over
Yeah,
time,
yeah,
which is easier to read than purposes. The evolution of purposes we have over time, something like that would be.
yeah.
Yeah.
It would be better to use a more neutral phrasing and say that he's been trying to understand changes in human purposes over time. When he
Mm,
says evolution, he's implying that he already knows the conclusion in advance that our purposes have improved over time. That in some way
yep.
we've been making progress, which is like I agree with that, but I think it's a bad starting point for this kind of project.
The other thing is that like evolution. So while it makes sense that like the goals that we've chosen have evolved in that we've like gone through uh like a cycle of conjecture and criticism around them. Uh, like there's no reason they needed to get better. Like it's an odd thing to sort of say. Lots of cultures didn't have like their purposes didn't get better. Um, so yeah, changes is a better word there.
Yeah,
But yeah. And then he takes a huge amount of or relatively a large number of words to get a very small point across comparatively to the previous stuff.
Right. That we have enough food now.
We had enough food, and treadmills weren't known to old people or to ancient civilizations. Okay, what will people be doing in the future? A lot of
Wait,
purposes
did
today.
oh, did I somehow delete? Oh, okay. I accidentally deleted a sentence. I was
Oh
confused.
yeah, yep. The
Okay, I did undo. All right, yeah. What will people be doing in the future? Lots of purposes are due to scarcity, he says.
well, generated by scarcity, which makes it sound like there might be a way to automate the creation of them. Um,
Oh,
it's not like
yeah, just
scarcity
give
is a
machines scarcity. There's not a scarcity of scarcity.
there are scarce resources in the world. Okay, that I feel like is a reasonably uncontroversial sentence for once. People want to get more of something. Time itself is scarce. He's jumped to really short sentences now. Eventually, those forms of scarcity will disappear. That's
Wait, time
hugely.
as a scarce resource will eventually disappear?
Yeah, like how
Oh,
does
because
he?
of immortality? But even with
But that
immortality, there's concerns like heat death.
but even time only becomes unscarce if you have like no deadlines. Like if a meteor is coming towards your planet, then it doesn't matter if you're biologically immortal. Time is still scarce.
Yeah, yeah, and if there's any sort of competition,
Yeah.
if you're not the only person in the universe and other people are using resources and you're like, I want my own solar system, well, you have to claim a solar system before they're all taken.
Um, yeah, not just that. I mean, there's other like
Or if you
human
want to invent
demand.
something or like,
You want to
pioneer
do it before other
something.
people.
Yeah, there's time pressure.
Or you've come up with an invention, but now you need to actually like build it and market it and sell it to people before other people do. Or come up with something that's maybe less good but easier to make, or they're bigger or whatever else. Yeah, there's always scarcity. Not just to mention like as humanity's capacity to generate electricity is increased, our demand is increased as well. Um, like I don't think this holds up anywhere.
Yeah, and also, you're not going to be able to do more than 24 hours of activities in a day. So if you want to, do gardening every day and clean the house every day and cook a few meals every day and so on, you could add up a long list of activities you want to do every day. And you could
Or
make your list more than 24 hours and then you'd find time is scarce.
even just stuff like you need to do something, to the tomatoes before they're ripe or, before they start fruiting or whatever else. Yeah,
Right, you
anyway,
start some projects and then the projects have a schedule to them.
mm. So yeah, this next sentence, like he talks about discontinuity and doesn't really like I presume that's a discontinuity in scarcity, but
Yeah, that's awful.
like
He should say what type of discontinuity. It's such a thing to bring up just abruptly with no explanation.
it'll be a dramatic discontinuity, except that we've just introduced like eventually those forms of scarcity will disappear. It's like it'll be far in the future and then it'll be overnight.
Yeah, he must mean discontinuity compared to the current situation. So like we're getting rid of various scarcities, and then the scarcity that will be the most dramatic to get rid of is time scarcity, which is a very questionable claim in a lot of ways. One of which is, what about like rationality scarcity or honesty scarcity? Like you can come up with very important things, but if you changed them, would make a big jump. Effective learning scarcity.
Um, the other thing here as well that sort of annoys me is when someone like has a training in mathematics, and they use a word like discontinuity in a way that like we could interpret this geometrically in terms of like graphing scarcity of some kind, and like
Yeah,
discontinuity has a very particular meaning. Um, and I don't think his
right.
using that meaning at all here. If he was a,
Yeah,
you know, an English major, it's way more acceptable. But
right. So
he
what
should
you
know
mean
better.
is a discontinuity is actually a break in the graph rather than just a steep slope.
Yeah.
Right.
At the very
But he,
least, a cusp, but not a like it can't be continuous. Um,
right, it can't just be a curve,
whereas
even
I
a
think he
steep
sort of
one.
means, yeah, I think he
Like,
means like there will be the pattern will change. Like things might accelerate much faster all of a sudden or things like that. Um,
yeah, but it won't be an overnight transition. When we invent immortality, it's going to take a while and we'll go through a transition phase and things will improve over time rather than just an instantaneous jump.
mm, both in technology and access to it.
Yeah,
So,
and how society deals with it, and like there will be cultural shifts to accommodate it better. Like people will start having fewer children or waiting on children and stuff.
mm,
But that won't
so
just be a discontinuous jump where everyone instantly understands the implications for children. You know, there will be some people right away like are like, wait, abort, we're gonna have a kid next month, but now we should hold off. But other people will just go ahead with kids. And so there will be a tapering off.
I think if, well, arguably, if people had lost time scarcity, then like having kids is something a lot of people like avoid doing because of time scarcity. Um, so, I mean, I don't think that kids or people will just start having lots of kids because they don't have time scarcity anymore. But it's a thing that I think isn't really taken into account by those who claim that all scarcity is going to go away. Um, and then he says this, despite the subject of the last sentence being discontinuity, whereas he's really talking about immortality.
Whether this will be achieved. Right, so this is another instance, we ran into this earlier, where he has a pronoun that refers to the last noun in the sentence.
Yeah,
We
the
got that
last and the last
earlier with
one. Yeah.
that those.
Yes, yeah. There's
It
been a
was
few
right
times where
here.
his, his pronouns are weird.
Yeah, I mean, that's not awful, but he has so many different things he's saying that it's hard to follow. He's talking about too many things at once. He's jumping around too much to have pronouns like that and expect people to follow them reliably.
Yep.
There's so many topics at once. It's kind of overwhelming. So if you're going to be overwhelming for the content, you have to make the technical grammar stuff like extra clear. So at least that
Yep.
doesn't get in the way and people have a fair chance to understand the intellectual stuff.
Whereas, yeah, I feel like I need to read plenty of sentences twice, not because they're hard to understand, in terms of the ideas, they're just hard to parse. And then he says it's inevitable as well, this biological or digital immortality, but I don't think that's the case either. Um, there's lots of things that could go wrong before then.
Right. So this is also a very I think this is a careless thing to say. He means like biologically or in silicon kind of.
Yeah.
Biologically or with like artificial computers. But that's not what he says. He says biologically or digitally, which says that those are a contrast. Which is sort of assuming that our brains are analog computers or something. Which, like, I know there's things in that direction that people have said, but I don't think it's totally safe to just declare that.
Um, yeah, no. I think I feel like it's actually pretty demonstrable that it's not the case. That they're purely analog, because there's a lot of things for which it's either yes or no stuff. Particularly like persistence over time. Um, like we evidently have error correction um, in there that keeps things. It's not like memories are a thing that might get like every time you access them or things like that, they can get
Get
lossy.
reinforced
But
or
ideas or
lossy, sure.
reinforced um or what do you call it? You get those processes where like false memories start being created and stuff.
Yeah,
But ideas don't.
confabulation.
Um, I didn't realize there was a word for it. Um, but yeah, ideas don't change like that.
Yeah, confabulate.
Um,
Psychiatry. Fabricate imaginary experiences as compensation for loss of memory.
oh, okay, so that's a particular type of false memories then as well. because there's multiple ways of, like, experimenters have different ways of implanting them in people.
Yeah.
Like
I don't know how
this,
exact that this dictionary version is. Like, I think you can use it a bit more broadly than this.
well, Wikipedia seems pretty similar. Confabulation is a memory error defined as the production of fabricated blah about one's. Oh wait,
That's just sort of
no,
creating
okay,
false
no,
memories.
that's just general. That's just general. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think this, like, as compensation for loss is just poor wording.
Um. So they do have provoked confabulation. Yeah, confabulations. Anyway. Um. Okay. So many of our current goals are driven in part by immortality. I only get to live a certain time, so I better get this or that done. Sort of. I mean, there's still
That
reasons to
doesn't
do that.
really make sense. If you're going to live forever, you'd also be like, I better get this done because I want to get it done. Like, I don't know. If you
Yeah.
didn't care to get it done, having a time limit wouldn't make you care.
Yes.
I think
Yeah.
that's a good way to put it.
Yeah. I would. I yeah. It's almost actually. I feel like it's the opposite is sort of true. Like the significance of human goals is that they're meaningful regardless of mortality. We want to pursue them whether we've like there's some goals, if you only had a week to live, you would pursue that you wouldn't pursue otherwise. But many of the things that we feel like are meaningful, we choose to do regardless.
We
But yeah,
won't have the kinds of motivations we have today.
so that's a pretty big claim.
Yeah, he doesn't just say we won't have the specific motivations we have today. Like, we'll replace gardening
The
with a
entire
gardening
kind.
bot and vacuuming with a Roomba and pick some new goals. He's saying we won't have the kinds, like the categories, which is quite a claim.
He's not specific about whether they're all of them, but I think that's implied. Um, like it's not we won't have some of the kinds of motivations we have today.
He just has a comma and then a capital letter. Like, what editor let this through?
Um, yeah, let me check in the where's the other one?
Yeah, it's the same right here on your
Yeah,
screen.
yeah. I th Maybe the editor gave up by this point. Um,
What do the derivatives of humans in the future end up choosing to do with themselves? So he just means our descendants? Like, why is
I
he?
think
Derivatives is
descendants is
such a
what
fancy word out of nowhere.
I mean, the subhumans that are born of humans, or like it's a like derivative is, and again, particularly for someone with a maths background, um,
Yeah.
like a derivative is not a descendant, only in like the
Yeah.
loosest definition.
Yeah, he seems to mean things that are derived from us. There will be things that are derived from humans but aren't humans in the future. And what will they end up doing?
That's actually,
Wait,
yeah, that's
does he mean the machines that we made? Because at first I thought he meant like our actual descendants who just don't
likewise,
have
and
time scarcity anymore.
it's entirely unclear. I mean, I feel like he's been a bit, um,
I
he
just read the
hasn't
last
spoken.
sentence.
I know it doesn't help at all in clarity in terms of clarity. Um,
And this is one he
what is
doesn't
that
feel the
sentence
need to
even doing there?
hedge.
Yeah,
He's virtue signaling that he hates video games and that all his work in computers doesn't make him a video game player. He's doing important intellectual computer work.
this sentence feels entirely out of place.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, yeah, so regardless of whether he's talking about like the descendants of humans or like the things that we make, the AGI type things, um, I mean, it's like, yeah, okay, one of the, like on an individual basis, some people might do that, but what is that? That doesn't take away from the other people who are choosing not to do that or choosing to do other valuable things or do that in their spare time and work on valuable things. That's okay. So, I mean, at the very least, the
So
first and the last sentence of that paragraph sort of feel like they go together.
yeah, sure. Okay, so summing up a bit,
Mhm.
we could not predict at all what the text was like based on reading only the topic sentences. It turns out
Mm.
it, it was quite different than predicted, or than we could. Yeah, there's just a lot of stuff that we had no idea would be there. So the sentences we looked at did not work as an outline. It seemed like his paragraph breaks were a bit random and disorganized. The whole thing seemed a bit random and disorganized. Bigger picture, you can apparently be a prestigious person and write like that and get published in a book with, Dennett, Tegmark, Pinker, David Deutsch. Which, so I've skimmed the approximately the first half of the articles and I thought they were all bad. Was my impression from briefly skimming them, which I think says something about the world, both in a negative way, but also in a like an opportunistic way. Like, could you outcompete this? That seems maybe achievable. It gives you some sense of where the bar is, or so that's one of the possibilities. Is it gives you a sense of where the bar is, like where how high you have to aim in order to be successful and be contributing value and doing better than other people, and so on. So that's maybe useful. But on the other hand, it could mean something else. It could mean that you don't get in these books from merit at all. Like you're not competing on that dimension. You're just competing on prestige and social networking and so on. And so if there are a lot of like things written by obscure people, which are much higher quality, then that would indicate that it's a social networking issue. But if there aren't, then maybe merit matters.
Sorry, you say if there's things written by people who are more obscure but of higher quality, it's a social
Yeah.
networking issue?
Yeah. If there's a lot of higher quality stuff out there to find, and it's not that hard to find, that would indicate that
Oh,
this
as
book
in,
is intentionally not
yeah,
choosing merit.
yeah.
Like if you could just
Um,
Google blogs on whatever topic and find better writing than this easily.
so I feel like there are 10-minute long YouTube videos that are much, much higher quality than this from people that I don't have a high regard for. Um,
Yeah,
like reading the
that's
first, reading the
I
first, sorry, go on.
yeah, I agree. Like upper echelon gamers or history civilis or kings and generals or the China people.
Yeah, um, History Civilis is really good. Um, so yeah, reading this, I like one of the things that struck me is I feel like I not just could easily write something better than this, but I feel like I probably have. This is like pretty awful.
Yeah, and there's philosophical people who are better than this, such as Rucka Rucka Ali, who I don't especially like, but he's a better thinker than this. He makes music videos, but he also has a Rucka Reacts channel for discussion. He does a lot of like multi-hour discussions with other thinkers. He's an objectivist.
Okay.
He's not particularly
Um,
great, but better than this.
yeah, okay. Wikipedia doesn't speak particularly highly of him.
Yeah, Wikipedia doesn't like objectivists, and certainly not someone whose primary career is like comedy music stuff, and the
Um,
intellectual stuff is just on the side as a hobby, kind of.
so yeah, the entire thing. Anyway, yeah.
I do find it generally pretty hard to find decent quality writing to read. I find like I have a shortage of books worth reading and so on.
Mm.
Although that's field specific actually. That's especially it's a problem for philosophy. If you switch fields to say Austrian economics, it's much easier to find a lot of stuff that's decent and makes sense. I think it's just philosophy is particularly bad. Well, and some other fields are also particularly bad, but I think if you go to say history or hard sciences or coding, you're going to find a decent number of decent thinkers who can write better stuff than this.
Um, I think with coding, uh, if they stick to topics they know pretty well, then yes. But one of the fields that occurred to me is like particularly bad um, is so all the computer scientists who think they know how to make an AI, um, or like
Yeah,
Nick Bostrom and superintelligence and that sort of stuff. Um, that feels like a big school of sort of missing the point.
you lagged out of Zoom or something.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, Zoom says it's connecting. Um, I
Yeah.
might if it doesn't.
Speaking of the AI people, I'm currently reading Rationality A to Z, which is Eliezer Yudkowsky's like collection of 330 blog posts.
Okay.
And there are certainly some flaws, but overall, I think it's good that he's much smarter than most people, that his writing quality is completely fine, that he makes a lot of good points, most of which I already knew, but they're still like good points to be making. He's gathered together a lot of ideas from other smart people, and like he's done a decent job of picking out the good ones. Like he can tell the difference to some extent, and he's added some of his own stuff or integrated some things together.
Yep. So Zoom is just apparently like it just says connecting, like it's not even uh loading up anymore. So I'm gonna share over Discord on tutoring if that works.
Sure.
Um, so that should hopefully that's decent thing.
Yeah, so I think having some perspective about what the world is like and what to shoot for is important, or like what it takes to make a difference. There are lots of other pieces of evidence. Like it's good to know something about like what the colleges are like and that people come out of them not really educated well.
You mean colleges as in universities?
Yeah,
Yep. Um,
the high schools as well. It has
yeah.
consequences. Like if you want to start a business um, and hire people, you have to have a realistic understanding of the hiring pool and what it takes to get useful work out of the people you can hire. Like it takes a lot of management effort. You can't just be like, I'll hire some smart people and turn them loose on this problem. Like just having some money to pay them will not be enough to make things work.
No. Um, that'd definitely be the exception. If you found some smart people who are like independently motivated to solve that problem, I could see some progress getting made. Um, but you'd have to be fairly non-defined in terms of outcomes, which is not something you'd typically find in a business. But yeah,
All right, and then on the other end of summary, um, so it's good to practice text analysis, and also it's important to try to figure out repeatable methods that you can use in the future. So looking at just the first sentences is something I've found useful, both for reading and writing. And yeah, when it makes a total mess like this, that corresponds pretty well to the other sentences also being a mess. So you
Mm.
can use it as a skimming technique for one thing.
So this touches on one thing I was sort of thinking about was so in terms of like grammar, one of the troubles I think in terms of like the process that I've been going through, the reason that I like maybe am not making as much progress there as I might make in like a subject like maths, the inability to check things. Um, and I feel like these sort of techniques are like the way that you check stuff is by doing things in multiple ways. So, like if you have an
Yes.
idea of what you want to write, and then you go back and you apply like the first sentence type thing, and then like does this all make sense under this this constrained application or this constrained thing?
Yes. Yeah, coming at things from multiple ways and seeing that they all work out okay definitely helps. So you can like grammar check your article, you can topic sentence check it, you can have an outline, you can compare it to the outline. You can check the outline directly to see if you're organizing the field well. You can get criticism and feedback from people. Yeah, that's a lot of why people find philosophy hard is the difficulty of objectively figuring out when they're getting things right or wrong. And so that's a lot of what you need to make progress in the field is tools for that, which partially that requires building up your knowledge from smaller building blocks. You're ready to move on approximately when you are able to judge for yourself that you're getting something right and you think you're being confident and objective. And then if you can do that, then you're ready to build on it.
Yeah, okay. Um, so provided that you can at least reliably spot your own mistakes, um, that would be
Yeah.
sort of like
If you're
the corollary, yeah.
Yeah, if you do something and you're not sure if it's good or bad, if you don't know how to tell, that means you're not done with it yet. Like even if you could ask an expert and they could say this is correct, you got it right this time, but you still wouldn't really be ready. You have to be able to see it for yourself in order to carry on very much.
Yep.
So regarding that in general, there are specific techniques um, like checking grammar. But there's also most of it is like a little less structured than that, and you have to learn to deal with it anyways. And I think people do that fairly naturally in fields that they're good at. So, for example, if I was evaluating a chess move, there are some very specific named criteria I could use. Does it lose material? Is it a legal move? And some other things.
Yep.
But there's a lot of things that I could check and like patterns I could recognize and little tips and tricks that I know and so on that aren't like carefully structured like that. It's harder to use them as a checklist, but I'm still checking them. I'm able to see a lot of things. Um, it's the same with say cooking. When you're cooking something, if you have experience cooking, you're able to look at it and see like, is this a disaster? Is this roughly going how it's supposed to? And it's hard to
Yep.
formalize that. Like, what exactly do you look for when you have this pan with some food in it that's cooking? But you can glance at it and you can tell the difference usually between, oh, everything's burning or there's way too much water or something versus looks roughly like it's supposed to. So
Yep.
being able to do like informal checks or things that are hard to put on a checklist, and so it's hard to put it on a checklist for an inexperienced person who doesn't understand the field and just write it out so they could do it just by rote.
Mm.
Um, but you still need to be able to do it yourself, like to build up that ability.
Yeah, yep.
So yeah, as you go along in a field, you have to get a sense for what's right and wrong and learn better to recognize it.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
Pinker gave us a lot of examples of wrong.
We got different examples from Wolfram.
Oh, yeah, that's what I meant, Wolfram.
Oh yeah, yep.
I just said the wrong
Yeah,
name.
I think Wolfram was worse than Pinker. Pinker was like
We only
fancier,
read
but
one paragraph of Pinker, so it,
oh, that's true. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, that's maybe that's why it seemed better. It was just less. But yeah. Mind if we take a quick break?
go ahead.
Cheers. Cool.
I started reading, and he's just giving some history of AI field for some reason that he doesn't really explain. He just launches into it. People used to think computers were giant electric brains when they had no idea what was going on.
Did they?
That's what he says.
Um, I feel like the
But
giant electric brains like that reminds me more of like the analogies in the 90s about computers being dumb.
he's talking about
I mean,
headlines in the 40s and 50s, so I'm not familiar with those, so it could be true.
there's definitely like around that time there was a lot of like if you look at, the stuff that was made in the 60s, even like up through the 80s, the things that they predicted for like the year 2000 or 2020 were pretty out there. Like Blade Runner set in 2019.
Wait, he literally says he assumed that humans were magic.
Where
I'm scrolled down a ways.
oh, I'd assume there was some magic.
That's
Does he mean in like 2002 and 2003? He thought that?
oh, I didn't read the previous paragraph. Huh.
It seems like he's continuing on from.
Wait, he says that Wolfram Alpha, which takes a collection of knowledge and automatically answers questions, is analogous to biological evolution? What on earth?
No.
Oh, we're back to goals and AIs. You talk to them. It works pretty well when you're talking to Siri. But Siri doesn't deal with long things, so you need a programming language? What? Alright, let's just look at the end and see what the conclusion is.
It feels like it's going more back in time in the late 1600s. Like,
He ends up saying that there's no qualitative difference between a cellular automaton or a brain-like neural network. I think he's just saying it's all Turing complete, so who cares?
that's a quality, but it's not the like it's not the complete set of qualities.
Yeah,
Like to say there's no qualitative difference is very
he's
different from
just
saying
repeating
like only
himself.
one aspect.
The brain-like neural brain-like it literally he's calling our brains brain-like neural networks. Was produced by the long history of civilization. Whereas the cellular automaton was created by my computer in the last microsecond. He thinks that's the difference.
So I guess he's not counting the long legacy of people writing various software and languages on different languages and so on and building up so that you can actually have, a cellular automata and a few lines of code.
And now he says that recognizing extraterrestrial intelligence will be really hard. But
What?
I don't know. I think if they make it to Earth, they'll probably be able to just crack our language and talk to us.
Um, I feel like it's not even like necessary to do that to establish like that someone's intelligent. Um,
Right. If they make it to Earth in a spaceship at all, I'm gonna go with
that's
intelligent.
yeah. You've got to have a much larger explanation about why they're not intelligent than if they were.
Right. If their spaceship doesn't look like a star or a planet or the kinds of things that we know physics process make by itself.
It could be a space whale.
Yeah. But also, what I think is interesting about this is people don't realize that bridging the gap between yourself and your child is also you have these two intelligences and you have to like find common ground and shit. Like it's fundamentally the same problem to deal with a different person, especially an infant who hasn't,
Well,
already bridged the gap as dealing with an alien.
even I'm actually curious whether it's how quick it is for like particularly when people are dropped into really foreign cultures. So say you had like two sort of tribes, one in the Amazon and one in like I don't know Alaska, that were relatively disconnected from technology, and you took a person from one and put them in the other. How long does it take them to learn the language and the customs and the stuff like that? Um, Provided they're not, like killed or whatever. Um,
Yeah, I don't
because
know.
presumably it's not going to take like longer for, an advanced alien civilization to maybe if it's
Yeah.
like a speed of light communication thing, but other than that,
People think that sharing the same biology makes your minds compatible or something. It's like the whole idea of mind design space rather than the
yeah.
universality idea of BOI.
So this is like uh so this is like turkeys finding each other attractive sort of thing as compared to like flowers being beautiful. That sort of um like the mind design space is the its only parochial argument, is it? That's sort of where I'd guess.
They think that there are many, many different designs for minds that think in many, many different ways, and we just have one particular type of mind.
Uh, do they think that we can learn any particular type, or that we all are born with the same type?
Yeah, that's less clear whether they think we can like simulate all the other minds
Um,
or have like a translation layer. I'm
because
not sure.
I could see like different. I mean, I've got no reason to believe that there wouldn't be like very different ways of thinking or whatever, but I don't have a good reason to think that humans wouldn't be able to do it. Might be harder and easier, but um, so one thing he says here, there's no bright line between intelligence and mere computation.
Oh, yeah. The next paragraph also just says intelligence isn't
Special.
special, or intelligence isn't a distinction, it's just computation. It's sort of like saying we're not special because we're made out of atoms and so are rocks.
Yeah, no, that's and rocks will. I mean, it feels like there's something underneath like going with like Ray Kurzweil's idea about computronium or something or other, as like the rocks are at the very least in potential for being as smart as us. So there's no distinction. I mean, he's actually saying here there isn't a distinction. Not that there's like no fundamental difference, or that like given, an instantiation of knowledge they can be made equivalent, but there like intelligence is not a distinction between us and other things. That's pretty crazy.
He just repeats himself again. The answer is that the detail of what's happening in the box were derived from the long history of human civilization, including whatever people watched on YouTube the day before. Yeah, he just thinks if he
So
says it enough times, it'll be true or insightful or
this
convincing or something.
it occurs to me he's making the mistake of like conflating the idea of like particular states of things with like meaningful systems that are like governed by abstract um, rules or abstract explanations. Um,
Read this last
like
paragraph. There's a callback to the video game thing.
realizing there isn't a genuine distinction between intelligence and mere computation leads you to imagine that future. Uh, I presume that future. The end point of our civilization is a box of a trillion souls, each of them endlessly playing a video game forever. What is the purpose of that?
Yeah,
So
so he thinks that if you upload minds into artificial computers, then whatever your life is, no matter what you do, it essentially counts as wasting your life playing video games because you're not in the real world.
yeah, so it's sort of I'm like
As if
unclear if that's like made more specific somewhere. Um, but if that is just what he means, it's like ludicrous.
it is made more specific in the previous paragraph. He's talking about um, human consciousness, human consciousness, readily uploadable in digital form, virtualized, put it in a box with a trillion people, run to a computer, virtualized people in the box. So yeah, he's just talking about mind uploading. And then he says that, yeah, mind uploading is like playing video games. So he sees like the physical world as fundamental in some way. And he doesn't understand that it's just information processing and that if you're in a box doing information processing, it's the same thing, especially if you're interacting with the external world via, robots and tools and
Or
microscopes and so on.
like you have some sensors that you can like receive information through maybe um yeah, I feel like he would argue that somehow human minds have some kind of like direct connection to reality where these virtualized minds wouldn't. Um, which is just a parochial misconception. Like, and I mean the word essentially as well, I think is pretty damning there in terms of what he's saying, in that like he's condemning these trillion souls to never doing more than that.
Yeah.
He actually brings up 42 as like a realistic thing, a few paragraphs up. Like maybe we'll go through all of history and it'll turn out that 42 is actually what we'll get.
Oh, that's
And then he says nothing like that will
odd.
happen.
Oh, he says might be true about our world, but won't happen. What does he mean by might be true plus won't happen?
It might be true is that maybe we'll go through that. And then nothing like that will happen.
That's
I
odd.
really, really dislike the way that he introduces some idea as though he's supporting it and then immediately contradicts it. Like
Yeah,
he's
he
done that
did
a few
that
times.
repeatedly.
It's
Yeah, so one of the things you can put on your to-do list as an optional project is to try to do an analysis like this. You could pick a different chapter in the book or find a different book, and see how you can do yourself looking through it.
Yeah, that was one of the things I'd intended to do if I had a bit more time. Um, so I'm not sure if I'll pick something from here or um, might pick something a bit easier. Um, start with the nothing comes to mind.
Yeah, it's tricky to say what's easier because like this has plenty of flaws to criticize.
Yeah. Um,
When the people
I
are
guess
talking about things that are too complicated and hard for them, they make more mistakes in some ways.
yeah. It occurs to me that it's a bit different from doing grammar analysis where like more complex stuff with grammar will like almost always make it harder. Whereas with this sort of stuff you can just take it slow and because there's a plethora of errors, um, it sort of makes it easier. Like if I took simpler writing, um, so like pretty much anything on fallibleideas.com I think is going to be like simpler than this.
Yeah.
But it'd be, I mean, I could analyze it in terms of meaning, that would be fine, but not in terms of the mistakes that are made.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's sort of interesting just that they're, yeah.
One of the other projects that I'd like to try is getting in the direction of debates and analyzing a debate between two people. So I don't know if you have any good ones, like if you've had a recent debate in IMs that we could go through the chat log and then try to put it into a tree and see where people were not responding to each other or like we're missing each other's point or that kind of thing.
Um, There's only one thing I can think of that's recent, like within the last months or so. There's maybe some stuff from before that. I probably can. I'll ask one of the chat rooms I've been in. I'll have to go back and,
Yeah. We
oops.
don't have to use your own stuff. We can just find something, but you might prefer if you have your own.
Um, yeah, I sort of like, yeah, I haven't spent that much time doing that sort of thing recently. So I'm sure there's might be some stuff I could find, but otherwise, yeah, um, we could find some stuff. Uh,
Yeah, the back and forth tends to have some different properties to it than a monologue like regular writing. So the analysis will be a bit different. And yeah, it's important to be able to engage with other people and see what's going on in those conversations. That's a good skill.
yep, yep. Um, yeah, no, I'll ask on what do you call it, on a politics chat room that I'm in, because there was some interesting stuff that was all of the discussion happened before like more than a month ago, um, and I wouldn't have the same discussions now, in that I was definitely like overstepping and overreaching a bit. Um, but it might be good, uh, particularly because like I have a tendency, or I think, lots of people do. Once we realize that something's like was a mistake or wasn't as good as we could have done or things like that, we don't go back and like thoroughly analyze it for all the mistakes. We sort of count it as done once we realize that there's one mistake, which I think is not a great habit, but not a good habit.
Yeah, being more thorough, I do think is important. I remembered a particular discussion that there's video of that I thought might be useful for you to see,
Hmm.
but I'm not sure which one it is.
One thing that I wish Google would
I can
do is
search for
add.
it later.
Okay, yeah. No, that would be good. I wish YouTube would provide an easy way to search the auto-generated subtitles.
Yeah, Justin has he sent me a file with all my video descriptions in one file or something that I was planning to put up, but I haven't yet. But I'm gonna look through that first. I might be able to search that. He was trying to figure out how to automate getting. He had it only for my streams or something. But he was looking into automating downloading every video description along with the link and stuff so that I could make an index of the whole channel. Because YouTube doesn't actually provide a very good index.
Hmm. One thing that I found trying to do something with my or with YouTube the other week or month or whatever it was, it's really like YouTube's API is really gated by comparison to what's available through the browser. Um, like annoyingly so. There's a lot of hoops to get to the point of like just enumerating all of someone's videos, for example. It's much easier to do like a grease monkey script or something.
Yeah, regarding the debates, I've been trying to get people to use trees to organize their debates. So as you have a discussion, you can write brief summaries of your points and put them into the tree as nodes, and then the other person can add their things to the tree, or one person could manage the whole tree and write for the other guy. Um, and one of the purposes is to make it very clear what is a reply to what, because people often do not clearly communicate that. And another purpose is to keep it organized and see like what hasn't been answered yet, because people often never answer something and they don't acknowledge it, and it's very hard to like uh, get them to see that they've been repeatedly not answering your question. Like people will both end up with the impression that the other guy is evading their points while they're being super responsive. And if you have a tree, you can have a more objective way to look at it.
Yeah, I had this reminds me of on this politics uh chat room I was in, um I mean there was a tool that was linked. Um I can't recall what it was called, but it was basically exactly this. It might actually be on Let's Wrong have like a debating tools page, I think. Anyway, yeah, so this thing had might have been ArgueNet.
Uh, I've
No.
seen some tools before, and too many of them are like pro-con based. Like you take a claim, and then
Mm.
you have pros and cons, and like you're sort of yeah, it's not organized properly for yes no approach where you're trying to come up with decisive criticisms of ideas. That's one of the things you can label in the tree that I think is really useful is for everything, is it meant to be a criticism of its parent? And if it is a criticism, is it intended and claimed to be a decisive criticism or not? Like,
Yeah, okay.
are you
Um
claiming that your argument means this other thing cannot be right? Like it's incompatible with it? Or are they actually, they could both end up being right?
yeah. Um I think I mean debating in general is I mean yeah, it's not the whole, for against is not very good, but I think that's probably why people um go with the pro con argument. But I imagine that most debates aren't um actually good enough to or most debaters aren't good enough to like have decisive arguments frequently enough.
Well, that's okay. They can learn as they go along, and they can just contribute what they can come up with. If they could actually understand what they're saying and what they have done, and see it properly, then it would be productive, and you could talk to them reasonably. Whereas if the reality of what arguments they've made and the impact of those arguments is very different than their impression of it, it's hard to talk to them when there's that huge mismatch between reality and what they think is going on. Like if they're unable to do some things and they recognize that and they're humble about it and say, oh, no one knows everything, but I'm trying, and here's what I've been able to contribute, you can deal with them fine. But when they think that they're like crushing you while saying non sequiturs, then you're not on the same page at all, and you need a way to get on the same page, or it's not going to be productive. And you do want a symmetric way that keeps in mind that you might be wrong and confused and so on yourself. And so making a tree or both making your own trees and comparing them is ways to do that. Like if you find that your two trees are very different, you can start looking at, okay, what are the differences? What's going on here? What happened? Unfortunately, my experience is most people are unwilling to even try to work through things step by step. It's
Yeah.
not that they're incapable, it's that they refuse to do it in general.
Yeah.
Like they
It's
don't want to put in that much effort or something. I think
it
that's
takes
an excuse.
it takes a lot more time than just saying your piece and leaving. And if they don't actually care about whether they're correct or not, like they care about having that viewpoint, then yeah, the time sink probably doesn't seem very valuable.
Yeah.
Um,
One of the things that happens a lot is I'll say something unclear and I'll ask a clarifying question. And the more patient people will try to clarify like 1 to 3 times before they give up. But then they'll say, you know what I mean, stop being so picky, etc. And I'll say there's still a key distinction here, which I find your statement ambiguous about. So it's like actually an important issue. And they're like, this isn't productive. We're getting caught up in details. I don't want to do this, etc.
yeah, it occurs to me this is probably a pretty big contributing factor to like the popularity of echo chambers as places to go and have discussions and things. In that, because there's a lot of like shared uh, prerequisite experience maybe, um, and shared expectations, you can sort of get on with things a bit, even if it's, you know, not very good, like not high quality. At least there's like,
Yeah, people don't want to get called on all the steps they're skipping. They like it when
no,
everyone pretends to understand and respect them and so on.
yeah,
It's easier to deal with. They're not used to the burden of communicating more. They want to keep making a lot of assumptions and not break it all down and talk to people who will let them do that. And they think that it's something like, Elliot is an outlier. He has different ideas, but most people have a lot in common with me, so I can communicate with them more easily. But what's really going on is most people, even if they're within the normal range, there's huge variation in people. So they're actually often not on the same page, but they just obscure it and downplay it and avoid conflict, which is totally different than actually understanding each other. Like, most people are the kind of person who can read that Pinker chapter, or sorry, the Wolfram chapter, and not raise an objection and just say, "Oh, that was kind
yeah,
of clever." Like somehow they can get through that without having a bunch of complaints and clarifying questions and so on. If most readers would actually challenge it, then books like that wouldn't do well, or they'd start having different editing policies and contributor policies. But the culture is accepting of chapters like that, and we'll let everything slide, even though most readers, don't get a coherent picture out of it. They don't understand something that makes sense from it, but they're accepting of it anyways.
yeah,
It's very similar with social norms. for like politeness, for example, where people will attack each other and say like you're rude, you're violating the rules, etc. But and they'll accuse some people of being like outliers or autistic or something. But then if you look at the quote so-called normal people, their social behavior and their politeness and their picking up on body language and so on varies a huge amount, and they're often not on the same page because there's just so much variety and diversity that it's not safe to assume everyone thinks the same thing you do. Even people who are like close friends from the same subculture, um, if you got them to actually answer what they thought, like in separate rooms about something, you'd find all kinds of differences. Whereas when
Yep.
they're actually together, they'll just be nodding and smiling and avoiding conflict.
Well, I mean, the other thing is I presume they don't factor in the error correction they do. Like if they were side by side answering questions, um, the error correction they do on the fly to make their ideas match more closely their friends' ideas or their peers' ideas, um, like which is very easy to do when their ideas aren't actually uh like very set in stone, particular, oh, there's a word for it, precise. Like when their ideas are imprecise to start with, it's very easy to like collaboratively end up at the same place as someone if you're doing that. It doesn't mean
Yeah,
that the place
a,
you end up is useful, but
a lot of times, whoever says something first, the whole group then goes along with it.
yeah,
This happens with like picking restaurants. Once someone says one, then it becomes the default choice, and if you challenge it, you're derailing the restaurant, and it's your fault that it takes forever to decide. So people will just
yeah,
give in. However, people are also like scared to speak out first. Like they wouldn't challenge whoever speaks out first, but they're also scared to do it themselves in case they got challenged. So a lot of people like don't say anything and sort of wait and see, and then whatever gets said, then they'll go along with it if it looks like it's going to be popular. They really avoid
yeah, yeah.
risks.
Um, yeah, there is that meta element as well, as in like if it looks like it's going to be popular. Um, because if someone suggested, it was a dinner thing, and someone, I don't know, suggested uh fried chicken feet, I can imagine things like that. Or I don't know, a pizza place that only has pizzas with anchovies. Um, those sort of contrived examples, people would feel comfortable only because of the perception of everyone else. Whereas if you're not going to have um, oh, so this book I own a copy, but I haven't read it.
Oh, yeah, it is mediocre. It's okay. It's not awful, but it's not impressive either. I've read like two-thirds of it. This other one, by the way, is Measure What Matters, is awful.
Yeah, okay.
This is a newer one that's like related, but bad.
Um, are these
But
part of like a particular sort of management theory or?
yeah, yeah. But high output management, a lot of it is kind of common sense, and a lot of it seems like stuff that shouldn't be that hard to figure out, but it's probably helpful to tell people. Probably a lot
Um,
of people don't actually know it, so I think it's good.
yeah,
But
I mean, one of the in the same way that people can give better advice sometimes when it's not about them, um, but when it's about a friend, even if the situation were the same, uh, common sense is hard to do well consistently, or it's like taking the good bits of common sense um, consistently and applying them is more difficult than people give it credit for. Um, so even when things are really obvious, just having like a list um, can be really helpful because they don't have good ways to like stick on track and not do the bad options.
yeah, I think it's a useful book for people who want to do management stuff and don't know what they're doing, and it'll give them a reasonable starting point. The reason I was searching for it is there was a story I remembered, which might be from that book. I'm not positive, but I think I might have read it in this book. And it was talking about the issue of people having a wait and see approach and not wanting to put themselves out there and like make a statement. And so the book is talking about running meetings and how to do that and how to organize them and so on. And it talks about the importance of having like the right people with domain expertise in the meeting. And it says, but if all of the people are like domain experts, you need to add one manager to the group. because what happens is all the regular people like don't know how to lead. So they'll all like talk around the issue and like very gradually sort of approach a consensus while no one takes any risks. And if you put one manager person in the room, even if he's not, even if he has no idea what he's talking about on the subject, he can still lead the group by recognizing when they're not making forward progress and then just asking them a few questions and saying, so do we have an answer now? And like prompting it and putting himself out there. And then they'll all go, oh, yeah, yeah, we agree. And it moves things along.
Okay. I sort of would have imagined the opposite sort of thing happening, where you end up with like a deadlock of people arguing over like minutiae or things, possibly missing the point entirely. Um, it occurs to me that might be a generalization formed of my experience, though, as opposed to everyone
Yeah,
else's.
it does depend on the group. That can happen. The context was meetings that were relatively productive and people are actually able to agree.
Yeah,
Yeah, the deadlock stuff is interesting and important, I think. One of the causes is people have different goals. So, like, the marketing department cares about their own success and their own metrics, while the salespeople want to get their commissions, and the engineers want it to be elegant and not have to tack on a bunch of crap and so on. And so,
yeah. I
because
was,
people have different goals, they're pursuing incompatible, or yeah, they're each pursuing their own objective and it's not the other people's, and so you get a lot of local optima.
yeah. I was just thinking the times that I can sort of start to think. I mean, it's hard to sort of put my finger on times where it's been like a really like there's been any really productive meetings. But when there has been, it's often been when there's like a really clear goal. Um, so like an easy thing is like an incident response in like IT. Um, Even without a manager in the room, everyone knows that there's like time pressure and like
Yeah.
there's a very clear goal. And so you can be super productive. Whereas like some of the corporate projects I've worked on, where especially when like change of scopes happen and stuff like that regularly, it's impossible to make progress, and no meetings are ever productive.
Yeah, that's one of the things the book talks about. It warns about the cost of meetings if you look at like the salary of all the people there and so on. And it says, I think it says basically write down the purpose of the meeting in advance in writing, and send it out when you're inviting people to the meeting so everyone knows what they're there for. Like, and
Mm.
have the meeting have a clear objective. Actually, the management philosophy is called management by objectives, and they specifically mean measurable objectives. So you come up with things you can measure, and it's quite a simple philosophy, but yeah, find some measurable objectives and then work on achieving them, and keep measuring to see if it's working. And this beats like not having a management philosophy. It
It
also
reminds
beats
me,
overly complicated ones that don't actually work better.
yeah, maybe one of the overly complicated ones that this reminds me of is it's like half of the outcomes and key results idea. Um, in that half of that is meant to be measurable and half of it is meant to be qualitative, roughly speaking. I'm not convinced that it's actually particularly good, especially when people don't stick to it, which is hard. But yeah. Anyway, um, oh, it's an old
Yeah,
idea.
that's
Well, this one is. Yeah.
OKRs is a very similar thing to the management by objectives, I think.
Yeah. Well, it's
Oh,
not.
OKRs
It's.
actually is the Andy Grove one. I just mixed up the name,
Oh, okay. Yep.
apparently. But yeah, they're very similar things anyways.
Um, I'm not sure that there's any real innovation between the two. Well, I guess one of them is about management. One of them is I guess like involves the person a bit more. Um,
The Grove book came out 1 year before the goal, which I think is interesting because it's so much less sophisticated and it's coming out in the same time period. So like better ideas were possible at the time.
yeah. Well, the goal doesn't really talk about like management as in like an art sort of thing. Um, it feels like it's a lot more general about uh, like there's not much about like managing people in that from
Yeah,
memory.
the main stuff for managing people is it talks about like how to do problem solving, how to improve your company. So like that, if you get people participating in that process, like looking for bottlenecks and the focusing steps and so on, if you do that with people, that will make you a more effective manager.
Mm.
That's one of the main things managers should do is know the framework for problem solving, the methods of problem solving, so that they can help guide their subordinates to do effective problem solving. But
Yep.
yes, Goldratt adds a lot more management stuff in some of his other material.
Imagine like critical chain and project management type stuff. Well, I'm not sure about
No,
stuff
critical
like.
chain is not about managing people, it's about managing projects.
Mm.
So that's pretty different.
Yeah. Okay. Um, all right. So for next time, oh, so maybe quick thing to touch on in terms of like the grammar stuff. So I can like these the two videos that I was um or there was the arithmetist and uh the Mises book, I think. Um, so that stuff.
Yeah,
Once I'm done with that, well, I guess analyzing lies is probably the better thing to go on. Um, like Peacock's always going to be there, and if it's more advanced as well, I'm not sure whether it's that good to focus on it now. Um,
yeah, I would go through the arithmetist and the Mises stuff first. It's
mhm.
meant to lead into later analysis, and I think you know enough grammar that it shouldn't be a big problem. In
Yep,
fact, I made those a while ago when I knew less about non-finite verbs. Anyways, there's probably some mistakes.
yep. Did you change your mind about that as a subordinate conjunction, by the way? Um, I'm not. I
No,
wasn't.
really.
No, okay. Um, I wasn't sure. But I don't think we have actually talked about it that much as a topic. But you talked about it in one of the in the third um, video in the number one folder. But yeah, so I've got a bit of that. That makes sense. And then some analysis of choosing. I should look for debate stuff maybe. Um, see if I can find anything that's good. Um, otherwise, before next week, is there anything else that I should take down?
No, that sounds reasonable.
Cool. All right. Sweet. Well, um, that'll be good for the weekend then.
Okay.
All right. See you next week.
Yep. Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Hmm.